The crimson light of the distant star flickered in the sky like a dying ember, casting a deep red hue over the jagged surface of the planet below. Captain Mira Sato stood at the helm of the starship Aegis, eyes fixed on the swirling atmosphere of the world ahead. Her fingers hovered over the console, her every instinct urging her forward. The tension in the air was thick enough to choke, an omen, perhaps, of what was to come. She was no stranger to danger, but today felt different. Today, it wasn't just her life on the line. "Captain," came the voice of her first officer, Lieutenant Jalen Kaur, breaking the silence. His tone was calm but laced with unease. "We've reached the coordinates. The Ark is on the other side of the planet." Mira nodded without turning to look at him. She had already seen the trajectory data, every decimal point a sharp reminder of the stakes. The Ark was humanity's last hope, a massive, self-sustaining colony ship, designed to carry the last remnants of humanity to safety. The enemy was closing in, an alien horde bent on annihilation. There was no time for hesitation. The Aegis was their only chance to get there in time. "We'll need to be quick. Set a course, Kaur," she ordered, her voice tight, steely. "No detours. Full speed." Kaur didn't hesitate, his fingers a blur over the controls. He kept his gaze ahead, his back straight, as if trying to swallow his fears. He wasn't sure what was more terrifying, the thought of facing the enemy or the idea that the Ark might already be gone. The ship shuddered as the engines roared to life, propelling them towards the planet's dark side. Mira's eyes narrowed. Her mind was sharp, but something gnawed at the edges of her thoughts. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that something was already waiting for them. The enemy was clever, fast, and merciless. But she had something they didn't. Hope. "We've got incoming!" Kaur's voice sliced through her thoughts, urgent and full of fear. Mira's heart skipped. Her eyes locked onto the display as it flashed red with warnings, multiple signatures, each one larger and faster than the last. The alien fleet had arrived sooner than expected. She moved without thinking, reaching for the comm panel. "All hands brace for impact. I repeat, brace for impact." The ship jerked violently as the Aegis made a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding a direct hit from a plasma torpedo. Mira's grip tightened on the armrest, every muscle in her body coiled. Her mind raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Steady, Kaur! Don't lose them! We've got one shot at this." "I've got them," Kaur replied, though his voice shook. "But there are too many. We won't outrun them." Mira glanced at the console, analyzing the situation in an instant. The enemy's ships were coming from all directions, fast and merciless, a storm of destruction. But there was still a way through. She had one last trick up her sleeve. She leaned forward, her eyes burning with determination. "Activate the cloaking device," she ordered. Kaur's fingers hovered over the console, uncertainty flickering in his gaze. "Captain, the cloaking system was damaged in the last skirmish." "It's not." "I said activate it," she snapped, cutting him off. He hesitated, then nodded grimly. "Aye, Captain." The ship shuddered again as the cloaking system hummed to life. The Aegis disappeared from the radar, vanishing into the void. Mira could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her breath shallow. They were invisible, but for how long? The alien fleet would be hunting them now, every sensor, every eye in the sky scanning for a trace of their ship. It was a risk, but it was their only chance. If they could get to the Ark undetected, they might just stand a chance. But Mira knew better than anyone that risks came with consequences. The quiet hum of the cloaking device was the only sound as they glided through the empty expanse of space. The tension built slowly, steadily, until it was a weight on her chest. She didn't need to see Kaur's face to know he was sweating, his hands shaking as he kept his fingers locked to the controls. There was no room for error now. "Stay focused," Mira murmured, almost to herself. "We can't afford mistakes." As they neared the Ark's location, the silence stretched. Mira's heart ached. She thought of the families aboard the ship, the mothers and fathers, the children who still believed they had a future. The truth was, not everyone would make it. No one was guaranteed a happy ending in this war. But they could still try. They could still fight. We're almost there, Kor said, his voice a little steadier now. Just a few more minutes. Mira's eyes were fixed on the planet below. The Ark was out there, orbiting the lifeless moon. Humanity's last hope for survival. And then, the alarms blared. Warning! Energy surge detected! Kor's voice cracked through the comms. Mira's blood ran cold. They've found us. The Aegis shook violently as a beam of searing energy ripped through the space where they had just been, grazing the edge of their hull. Mira slammed her hand down on the console. Cloak it! Now! The ship flickered back into visibility, just in time for the second blast to miss them by inches. They were no longer invisible, and the enemy knew exactly where they were. Mira's mind raced, calculating their chances. The Ark was close, but the alien fleet was closing in faster. Launch the torpedoes, Mira ordered, her voice hard and cold. We fight or we die. A series of explosions rocked the ship as the torpedoes launched. The Aegis shuddered under the force, but it kept moving, kept pushing toward the Ark. Mira's eyes locked on the planet. She could see the Ark now, a massive vessel dwarfing their ship, but the distance was still too great. She needed a miracle, and miracles were hard to come by. Hold on, she whispered under her breath. Hold on, just a little longer. The battle was far from over. But she would fight, just as she always had. Because this time, humanity wouldn't go down without a fight. And she would be damned if she let the spark of hope die. The Aegis lurched forward, its engines groaning as it pushed closer to the Ark's orbit. The familiar hum of the ship's systems was a small comfort to Captain Mira Sato, but the weight of their mission pressed down on her chest, suffocating and relentless. She could see the Ark now, so close, yet still so far away. It loomed like a shadow on the horizon, its hull dark against the cold expanse of space. We're almost there, Lieutenant Kor said, his voice strained as he manipulated the ship's controls. The tension was palpable, thick enough to choke anyone who dared to breathe. The enemy fleet was still on their tail, closing in, and Mira knew time was running out. Mira gripped the armrest, her knuckles white. The Aegis had taken more hits than she'd cared to count, and their resources were quickly dwindling. She glanced at the ship's damage report on the console. Broken engines, scorched hull plating, and an overheating cloaking system. It wouldn't hold much longer. We need to dock with the Ark now, she ordered. The urgency in her voice left no room for argument. Kor's fingers danced over the controls, sweat trickling down his forehead. I'm trying, Captain. The enemy's too close. They've already started firing on us again. Mira's eyes narrowed as a volley of plasma beams streaked across the void, missing the Aegis by mere inches. They had no shields left. If they took another hit, it could be the end of them. The Ark wasn't far, but there were still too many enemies between them. Too many odds stacked against them. We can't outrun them. Not like this, Mira said, her voice steady despite the storm swirling inside her. Kor shot her a glance, his expression tight. Then what do we do? Her gaze hardened as she leaned forward, her fingers moving quickly over the console. There was no time to think. Only to act. We make them chase us. Kor looked at her, confusion flickering in his eyes. Captain, what are you? I'm going to give them a target. A distraction? It'll buy us enough time to get to the Ark. She cut him off, her mind already running through the calculations. Without waiting for a response, she activated the manual override and diverted all power from their remaining weapons to the forward thrusters. The ship jolted, its engines roaring to life as it veered sharply away from the Ark's path. The enemy fleet followed suit, no longer focused on their distant prey but now chasing the Aegis with a renewed sense of urgency. Kor's voice cracked through the comms, laced with disbelief. Are you insane? They'll tear us apart. Mira didn't answer right away. She couldn't afford to waste time. Trust me, Kor. We have no choice. The Aegis plunged deeper into the black, the stars swirling around them as Mira kept the ship on course. Every moment felt like an eternity. The thrum of the engines was the only sound, an eerie counterpoint to the silence in her mind. But the silence didn't last long. A sharp explosion rattled the ship. The forward viewport flickered, static distorting the view, and Mira's heart jumped. They were hit, again. The hull groaned, a piercing sound that made her grit her teeth. "Status report," she barked, gripping the console. "Minor breach in the aft section," Kor said, his voice tight. "But we're still holding together." Mira's pulse quickened. The Aegis was barely hanging on, but they were still alive. That meant they could still win. The Ark was close. She could almost feel the hum of its engines beneath her feet. But just as quickly as that thought crossed her mind, the comms flared to life again, this time with a much colder tone. "Captain Sato, this is Commander Arelak of the Hether Fleet. You've led us on quite the chase." The voice came through smooth, calm, and devoid of any emotion. "You've delayed the inevitable. But now it's time to face the consequences of your actions." Mira froze. The voice was familiar, too familiar. Arelak, the commander of the Hether Fleet, was a ruthless tactician, a master of psychological warfare. And the worst part? He was a former ally. A man who had once fought for the survival of humanity, until he betrayed them to the alien horde for his own gain. "Arelak," she said, forcing the name past clenched teeth. "What do you want?" "The Ark," he replied simply. "I want the Ark, and you're going to deliver it to me. You've been running long enough. No more tricks, Sato. Your ship is broken, and your crew is on the brink of collapse. Surrender, and I'll spare you. Refuse, and you'll be the one to watch your people burn." Mira felt a wave of cold wash over her, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't. Arelak was trying to break her, to exploit the weaknesses in her mind. But she wasn't going to let him. Not now. Not after everything they'd fought for. "You've already made your choice, Arelak," she said, her voice firm. "I won't surrender." There was a pause, an eerie silence stretching between them. And then, the final blow. "We'll see about that." The transmission cut off, and the Aegis was struck again, the impact sending a jolt of agony through the ship's frame. Mira's grip tightened, her pulse racing. They were running out of time, out of options. She had to act. "Kor," she said, her voice low but filled with determination. "Prepare the escape pods. We're not going to make it through this fight. Not without help." Kor's eyes widened. "Captain, we can't abandon the Arkansas. We're so close." "I'm not abandoning anyone," Mira interrupted, her voice cold and resolute. "I'm buying them time." Before Kor could protest further, Mira grabbed the comms control. "All hands prepare for emergency evac. I repeat, prepare for emergency evac. We're launching the escape pods." The ship shuddered once more, as if protesting the order. Mira turned her back to Kor and faced the viewport once again. Her heart was heavy, but there was no room for regret. The Ark had to survive, and if that meant sacrificing her crew, so be it. The countdown had begun. Mira Sato could smell the burning metal, the acrid stench of fuel leaking into the air, and the sharp crackle of sparking wires as the ship groaned beneath the weight of destruction. The hum of the engines was gone, replaced by a horrible silence, broken only by the distant hiss of escaping air. She gripped the console tightly, knuckles white, her pulse steady despite the chaos around her. The battle was far from over, but this was the breaking point. "We've lost communications." Kor's voice cut through the tension, the fear lacing his words barely hidden. "The escape pods are still intact, but—" "I know." Mira cut him off, her voice calm, far too calm for someone in her position. She could feel the weight of every decision pressing on her chest, the lives of the crew, the fate of humanity, all teetering on the edge of a razor blade. "We don't have much time. Get to the escape pods, now." Kor didn't hesitate, though his gaze lingered on her for a moment, as if searching for some sign that they weren't done, that there was still a way out of this. But Mira didn't give him the answer he was looking for. She had already made her choice. The alien fleet was closing in, their weapons primed, their relentless assault pounding the Aegis into submission. Mira's eyes flicked to the viewport, the stars now distorted by the cascade of plasma fire streaking through the dark. It was only a matter of time before they were finished. The Ark was already out of range, too far to reach before the enemy had them in their sights. But then there was something else, something that made her blood run cold. "Captain!" Kor's voice was tight, his breath quick. "There's a ship. It's not one of ours." Mira turned toward him, brow furrowed. "What are you talking about?" "A single ship. It's approaching at high speed, and it's coming right for us." For a heartbeat, Mira could only stare. Her mind raced, trying to process the implications. Was it an ally? Another human ship sent to help them at the last moment? Or was it another force, perhaps another faction of the Hether fleet? Her instincts screamed to trust no one. But her heart longed for hope, no matter how fragile it might be. "Can you identify it?" Mira demanded, her voice sharper now. It's too far to make out. But it's moving fast," Kor replied, anxiety dripping from every word. Mira's hand hovered over the control panel as she weighed her options. If it was a trap, if the enemy had managed to intercept them with another fleet, they were done. But if it was help, if it was something more, then they could still fight. "Bring us within range," she said, her voice a command, not a suggestion. Kor hesitated only for a moment before he complied. The ship jolted forward, the Aegis shaking under the strain of its malfunctioning systems. Mira held her breath, watching the dark space around them, praying for something, anything, to turn the tide. The mysterious ship came into view. It was sleek, smaller than the Aegis, but agile. The markings on its hull were unfamiliar, a strange set of symbols Mira had never seen before. No human fleet, no allied force, bore those markings. Her heart sank. "What the hell is that?" Kor muttered, his hands frozen on the console. "Captain, what do we do?" Mira's mind raced as the realization hit. This wasn't an ally. This wasn't help. The ship had come for the Aegis, for them. "We engage," Mira said, her voice steady as steel. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. All hands to battle stations." As she barked the orders, Mira's thoughts were clouded with the weight of her decisions. If she engaged, they risked everything. But if they didn't, they might as well be dead already. The alien ship opened fire without warning, its weapons tearing into the Aegis' fragile hull with a burst of blinding light. Mira ducked instinctively as the ship shuddered, the alarms blaring louder, more insistent. Every inch of her body screamed at her to give up, to retreat, to save herself. But the crew, the Ark, they were depending on her. She couldn't just give in. "Return fire!" Mira shouted. The crew scrambled to get the weapons systems online, but it was too late. Another volley of plasma struck, and the ship lurched violently. Mira was thrown to the floor, her head slamming against the hard metal with a sickening crack. Stars danced in her vision, and for a moment she couldn't see. But the pain wasn't enough to stop her. She pushed herself to her feet, ignoring the blood trickling down the side of her face. "Status!" she yelled. "Engines failing." Kor's voice was strained. "Hull integrity at 30%. "We won't last much longer, Captain." Mira's hand tightened into a fist. Her body trembled with exhaustion, but she didn't let it show. There was no room for weakness now. Not when the lives of her crew were on the line. "Launch the remaining escape pods." "Get everyone out," she said, her voice hard, unwavering. Kor looked at her, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, no! We're not all leaving, Kor. We've come this far, and we'll be damned if we let them win." Mira's gaze locked with his, her determination clear. "Get them to safety." Kor's mouth worked as if he were about to argue, but there was no time. He nodded sharply and rushed to the comms. Mira turned toward the viewport, her eyes tracing the silhouette of the enemy ship as it approached. Every fiber of her being screamed to fight, but deep down, she knew it was already too late. The Aegis was broken, and there was nothing left to save. She was out of time. And then, Without warning, the final blow came, a blast so powerful it shook the ship to its core. The Aegis screamed in protest, its frame bending under the force, and Mira was thrown back against the wall, her vision going black. It wasn't over. Not yet. But it felt like the end. And in that moment, as she lay there, half-conscious and broken, Mira made a vow: if she was going to die today, it wouldn't be in vain. It wouldn't be without a fight. Humanity might be on the brink of extinction, but she would stand. Even if it meant standing alone. The Aegis was no longer a ship. It was a coffin, silent, battered, and floating aimlessly through the cold void. Mira Sato's eyes fluttered open, the sharp sting of pain lancing through her skull. She groaned and pushed herself up, her body protesting every movement. The dim emergency lights flickered above her, casting ghostly shadows across the shattered bridge. She could barely make out Kor's face, his eyes wide with panic. Blood was dripping from a gash on his forehead. He was kneeling beside her, trying to shake her awake. "Captain?" Kor's voice broke through the fog in her mind. "Captain, we have to go! Now!" Mira's breath came in ragged gasps as she tried to focus. Her surroundings were a mess: damaged consoles, sparks flying from wires, and the steady, mechanical hiss of failing systems. The enemy ship was still out there, circling like a vulture. There was no time. Her heart pounded as the realization hit her. The escape pods? Did they launch? She rasped. Kor's face contorted with guilt. "We couldn't launch them all. The systems were too damaged. Some of the pods, they didn't make it." A bitter taste of defeat filled her mouth, but she pushed it down. There was no room for weakness. She had to focus. "Is anyone still aboard?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kor nodded, his eyes dark with fear. "Just us. We're the last ones. The Aegis is too far gone, Captain." She blinked, struggling to stand. "We'll make it. We have to." Kor looked at her, a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "Captain, the enemy, they've already started boarding. We're out of time." Mira felt the weight of those words settle on her chest. There was no escape. The Aegis was doomed, and the Ark, humanity's last hope, was out of reach. She knew what she had to do. The path ahead was clear, but it wasn't going to be easy. "You're right," she said, her voice steady. "But we're not just going to die here. We fight, Kor. We fight until the last moment." Kor looked at her as if seeing her for the first time. The raw intensity in her eyes stirred something deep inside him. He had followed her commands without question before, but now, in this dire moment, it was different. He was seeing her as more than a captain. She was the last ember of hope. "Captain!" His voice trembled with something he couldn't quite put into words. "We're not finished," Mira interrupted. "Get to the weapons control. We'll make this their last mistake." There was a long silence. Kor's gaze shifted to the still functional weapons panel, the one area of the ship that hadn't been completely destroyed. He hesitated, then nodded. "Aye, Captain." Mira stood, her legs weak beneath her, but she pushed through it. Every inch of her body screamed for rest, but she wouldn't allow herself the luxury of weakness. She stumbled to the control panel, feeling the hum of the ship's failing systems beneath her fingertips. She could hear the enemy voices now, shouting commands, their guttural language filtering through the broken comms. The enemy was boarding, confident that the Aegis was a lost cause. They were wrong. "We still have a shot at this," Mira muttered to herself, gripping the last functional controls. Kor was at the weapons console now, his face set in grim determination. "I've got a lock on their ship, Captain. If we fire now, we might just take out their boarding party." Mira's pulse quickened. This was their last chance. This was everything. "Do it," she ordered. "Take them down." Kor hit the firing sequence, and the Aegis erupted with a burst of power. The last of their weapons fired, the shockwave reverberating through the ship. Mira could only watch as the explosion blossomed in space, beautiful and terrifying. The enemy ship staggered, momentarily thrown off course. The Aegis didn't have the strength to fight back much longer, but for a few precious seconds, they had gained the upper hand. "They're pulling back!" Kor shouted. "We did it! We—" But before he could finish, the ship shuddered violently. Mira barely managed to steady herself. The enemy hadn't given up, they'd only regrouped. "Captain, we've got incoming! They're not retreating, they're launching a final assault!" Kor yelled. Mira's heart sank. It was all happening so fast. There was no way out. Not for the Aegis, and not for her crew. The finality of it hit her like a punch to the gut. "This is it, Kor," Mira said, her voice firm despite the heaviness in her chest. "Take the last pod. Get to the Arkansas. If you can't make it, at least tell them we fought." "No." Kor shook his head fiercely, the fire in his eyes burning bright. "I'm not leaving you. We're in this together." Mira's gaze softened for a moment, but there was no time for sentiment. She could feel the Aegis groaning under the weight of its wounds. She could hear the alien ships closing in. "We don't have a choice, Kor. You have to go." He didn't answer at first. He stood frozen, caught between duty and loyalty. But then, he met her eyes, and in that moment, they both understood. "Take care of them," Kor said, his voice thick with emotion. "All of them." Mira gave him a curt nod. "I will." Kor sprinted to the escape pod, his movements fueled by a desperate urgency. Mira didn't watch him go. She couldn't. Instead, she turned to face the enemy once more. She had one final task. One last stand to make. Her fingers danced over the console. The Aegis was a wreck, but the ship had one final card to play. The self-destruct sequence. The ship had been designed with it in mind, an ultimate failsafe to prevent their technology from falling into enemy hands. Mira's heart pounded in her chest as she typed in the activation code. There was no turning back now. She had made her peace with this. But it wasn't just her life she was ending, it was the end of a mission, a dream. The ship would die, but she would make sure the enemy didn't walk away unscathed. "Goodbye," she whispered to the Aegis, to the ship that had carried them so far, through so much. With a final push, she activated the countdown. The Aegis would burn with the fury of 1,000 suns. And when it did, Mira Sato would be the last one standing. Humanity's spark would not die today,